What's up, YouTube? It's Age of Sigmar's top internet Warhammer villain, Stuart Irongus from McCown, and today we're here to do some math. We're here to do a math class. First of all, give us a like and subscribe. So many of you watching this video are not subscribed. It's a button you can click. The AI of YouTube should have made it like do a little shiny thing when I said subscribe. Hopefully it does that. Doesn't get confused by the Aussie accent. We'll see what happens. First of all, thank you for all your support on the previous Nuts and Bolts video. Okay, if you haven't watched that, go watch the previous video. But so many of you watched that and gave me some really nice feedback. I really appreciate it. That video, I was unsure whether people would like it. It's a bit of a nerdy video, but so many of you watched it and enjoyed it and left some lovely comments. So thank you very much for that. Anyway, so today I'm doing some math. I spent a good chunk of this morning doing this, basically doing the math for the cavalry units in the game. I've excluded some that were like a little bit complicated or just shit. So, you know, there's stuff like Blissbarb Seekers, which is a little bit hard to think about because most of the damage is in the shooting, and stuff like Dark Oath Fell Riders. I felt a bit awkward with including them, so I haven't included them. But some of the light cavalry options are a bit iffy on, but in terms of how to do the math and how to consider them in the context of the rest of the cavalry here. But I've tried to include everything that I think is just interesting to look at. I've included some bonus stuff that isn't technically in this cavalry definition, just for a bit of fun. Yeah, basically, what's important when doing this sort of math video is to talk about how you did it. The methodology is as important as the results. So you don't have to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I wouldn't exactly say that from this video. I would just say you need to understand how I got to these results, and if you can, agree with the results based on the methodology or not. Okay, so don't take it with a grain of salt. Just analyze how I did it, and if you agree with how I did it, then you can agree with what the results are. Okay, so basically what I did is I calculated effectiveness based on the points for all the units in the game. Okay, so if points get updated, this will have to change. But what I did is calculated for cavalry, one of the big things is the difference between the damage on the charge and off the charge, because you have +1 damage, this kind of thing. So I included these conditional bonuses on the charge. I did not include unit-specific rend bonuses, just because they're not going to apply a lot of the time. So they're not included, okay? So if you have your +1 rend versus infantry or monsters or whatever, that's not included. But if you have charge damage, whether it's in the form of +1 damage, or also mortal wounds on the charge, or shooting on the charge, this kind of thing, I have included that, okay, in the on-charge component. And what I've done is taken the on-charge component and the off-charge component and given them equal weighting to compute an average damage. So, you do like 9 damage on the charge, 5 damage off the charge. That ends up being, 7 damage average, okay? And then you get a points per damage. So points per damage is basically how many points do you have to spend to get 1 damage point, okay? So for each damage point, the Dragon Ogres in this example cost 25 points, okay? So that's the first thing. So damage is important, but for me also durability is important to think about. So what I've done is taken the wounds and converted them to effective wounds. And this is basically you take the wounds and you multiply the save and then the ward. If you see a ward of 7, that just means they don't have a ward. I just need that for the formula. And you end up with a points per wound, which is how many points you have to spend to get an effective wound, okay? And basically, I averaged the point per damage and point per wound to get a point per effectiveness, okay? And that's basically how I'm doing it. Now, it is like a little bit skewed in the sense that points per wound in general would be lower. So I guess what that means is that points per damage, if this is high, then I guess it would skew it to making it look like the unit is better than it is. That's the only thing I would say. So there is maybe a slight weighting towards point per damage, just because in general, sorry, it would be the other way around, wouldn't it? Yeah. So if this is really high, the points per damage thing, and the points per wound is low, then points per wound, I guess, would be weighted slightly higher. This is like 8. If this is like 9 on average, and then this is like 20 on average, then I guess the wounds have slightly more impact. I'm not sure. Someone who's an expert on these things can tell me in the comments. But in any case, we're getting an average between the points per wound and points per damage. And that is effectively how I'm going to rank the units. Now, I'm going to go through units in terms of Grand Alliance. And at the end, we're going to sort them. And we can see what the best units are. Okay? So, yeah. Now, why am I making this? Well, I think when you're list building, it's important to kind of challenge your own assumptions to do with the damage and overall stats of a unit. Of course, we have to consider synergies. I've tried to like kind of capture the obvious ones in this video, but for the most part, yes, I am kind of ignoring synergy, and that matters. But I think in AoS 4 it matters slightly less. You know, we're not taking like 6 synergy heroes anymore. You know, we might have some allegiance abilities and a couple heroes with abilities, but for the most part, we're not spamming a bunch of buffs to chuck on a unit like we used to, you know? So I think for the most part, this is actually quite representative of how strong a unit is. And it will be quite good to look at to inform your list building, like, you know, what units should I take? Because there's some surprising results in here. Like for me, I have certain biases against certain units, and some of them were like a little bit dispelled by doing this, and actually they may be worth another look based on this video. So I hope you get something out of this video and enjoy the math. I'll also do this for, I think, infantry in the future. The reason I did this on Cavalry is we're kind of in Cavalry edition. Cavalry very strong at the moment. Yes, a lot of them went up, but a lot of them didn't. So we'll go through them. Okay, so I'm just going to basically kind of minimize these columns here. And we're just going to have the point per damage and points per wound thing, because I think that kind of captures all of it, and I don't have to scroll left and right, and you should be able to see all of it now. Okay, so Dragon Ogres. So basically, Dragon Ogres, I'm going to zoom in like slightly, actually. Let's go like 230. I can't go more than 200. All right. Oh, I can do this though, right? All right. All right, so Dragon Ogres, so 220 points. So they're in Beast of Chaos. So I have included the bonus rend in their calculation, and they have kind of pretty good points per damage and pretty good points per wound. They're kind of like middling on both of these, and so you end up with 17, which is somewhere in the middle. So pretty middling unit in terms of the stats. Now they have their 4-up strikes first thing, so that is something that's interesting. You know, there's a little bit of like defensive capability versus other cavalry, I would say, is what they're really strong against. But overall, they're quite expensive. They're quite elite. So yes, they have good stats, but yeah, expensive. Centigors are actually interesting. So they're overall worse than Dragon Ogres. They've got a score of 18 here, but I haven't included the 4-up ward, but they're very squishy, but do good damage for the points. So yeah, as like maybe a shock cavalry option with that once per game 4-up ward, 10 of them is actually probably all right. Yeah, so yeah, I think they're interesting to look at for sure. A Beast of Chaos. Okay, Slaves of Darkness was interesting. I've included 2 options here, so the Knights and the Vanguard. So what's interesting here is the damage is pretty comparable. The Vanguard, okay, you have the once per game fight twice, but I haven't included that. But that is only once per game, and I feel like you don't always get 100% effectiveness out of it, so I can't just double this number. But of course, you know, you do have to consider that. So overall, they do more damage than the Knights, I would say. But the Knights also have an even greater swing towards charge damage, so they really need to charge to do a lot of damage. So the Vanguard really do quite a bit more damage than the Knights, but the durability is completely different. Like, and the Knights here have -1 to wound as well. So, I mean, pretty clear unit roles here, right? Vanguard, this is your do damage unit on the charge, and actually off the charge, they do pretty good damage as well. The Knights are more your tanky, you know, 3-up save juggernaut unit. But both of them are actually not that high in terms of point per effectiveness, and I think in general that's how Slates of Darkness is balanced. Is that it's kind of an elite army, so everything is expensive. And so it's all very strong, but and that makes it actually kind of easier to play because there's a lot of strong stuff that's expensive, but it's flawed, right? Everything is actually slightly overcosted, so that's how it's balanced. Khorne has always had the same problem with this. I don't know why I put Blood Crushers in Beast of Chaos. Let me fix that. But basically, yeah, Blood Crushers and Mighty Skull Crushers both do fuck all damage, and the durability is pretty good. But so, like, if we're looking at 36 and 41 points per damage, this is like screen level damage. Like Blood Reavers do more than this. I'm fairly certain. So, yeah, like, you're talking really bad damage for the points. So they're both quite bad, I would say. Yeah. Okay, Slaanesh Slickblade Seekers, a strong unit here. So, I would say slightly weighted more towards the durability, because basically it's 20 wounds for 190 points, which is really good. But the damage, it's all wounding on 4s, so the damage is not amazing. They can quite reliably get the +1 damage on the charge, because they have retreat and charge in their sub-faction, but yeah, other than that, the damage is fairly weak off the charge. So if you charge into them, they're not doing any damage. And yes, they can kind of counterpunch by moving out and then back in, but still, even on the charge, it's weaker than a lot of the other stuff here. So that's Slick Blades. Okay, Pascal Blightlords. Spoiler alert, this is the worst unit I did mathematically. And they're balanced this way because of their pre-game shenanigans sub-faction where you can just lock your opponent in, but man, they're pretty awful. They're so expensive. It's 2 of them for 250, and the damage is just not there. So, yeah, they're pretty bad, I would say. Okay, Zangor Enlightened, 170. So I thought this unit was trash. Looking at it, now I have given the +1 damage on the charge based on going second or being an underdog. So they have a score of 20 here, but I think that's probably slightly misrepresentative. They should have a lower score than that. But the 9.4 wounds is interesting. You can give them a 5 at Warden's Inch pretty easily, and they have like some rally bonuses, but I think they're pretty mid overall. Yep, so that's the Chaos options. Overall, Chaos actually has the weakest Cavalry out of all the Grand Alliances, which I think is interesting, and actually by quite a lot. So, yeah, Chaos stats-wise, weakest Cavalry for sure. Okay, Death, which has strong Cavalry for sure. I think, though, it would be in second place, based on what I know about the rest of them. So, OBR has the strongest of the Death Cavalry. It has Cavalos Death Riders, which really excellent in terms of durability because they have a ward save, and the damage on the charge is pretty good as well. But the Blood Knights and the Morbeg Knights are pretty close. Since the Morbeg Knights have the best recursion and also retreat and charge, where they don't take mortal wounds like the Death Riders, I would say this is the strongest of the three. And I would say they're stronger than Hex Rates as well. And Black Knights are the weakest that I analyzed here. So I think among the Death, it's pretty clear to me that Morbeg Knights are the strongest. You know, you get your retreat and charge. They have good damage on the charge, good durability. Okay, yes, it's slightly lower than the others, but they have much better recursion. So I would say that they're the strongest overall. Yeah. And then Death Riders is probably the second place here. Third place, Blood Knights. Fourth place, Hex Rates. And Black Knights are by far the worst of what I did. So I think in Soulblight Gravelords, I don't really see a reason to run Black Knights. Yes, the recursion is better than the Blood Knights, but I mean, I've given their charge and non-charge equal weighting, but man, the Black Knights off the charge, it's like real bad in terms of damage. So, and they're not like that fast, so yeah, can really happen easily. Blood Knights have better buffs as well. Like Wardry can give them +1 damage. You can make them ethereal, makes them really hard to kill. So, Blood Knight's better for sure. Okay, Gits. Yep, so spoiler alert, Boingrots are the best on this list by actually quite a bit. I think they're like 2 points ahead of everything else. So, the damage is insane, and they're not even really that squishy compared to the other, because there's still 10 wounds on a 5-up save, right, for 120. It's like actually not that bad. So, and they have recursion. So, yeah, I haven't even included the +1 damage from the +1 attack on the mounts from the sub faction. I actually haven't included that. So them and the hoppers are actually even better than what's indicated. I think if you do this math for gits in general, you're going to find that your units are actually just the best mathematically in the game. I think the army, frankly, is actually quite overtuned. It's just very hard to play and quite hard to list build. So, yeah, I think in any math document you do, you will just find that gits is probably the best army or up there. It has some problems for sure in terms of reliability, and it's kind of pointed around that. And in terms of durability, it has some weaknesses to high amounts of low quality attacks. Like, for example, Boingrots get murdered by Ren 1 shooting. And that is a factor for sure. But still, for the points, it's really good. 5 Boingrots for 120 is probably for your, take the flanks units. This is one of the best versions of it in the game. Spend 240 points, you get 2 units of 5, and if they get the charge, they can actually fight almost everything else in this list that's way more expensive than them. So they're real good. Yeah. Hoppers are worse than Boingrots overall, but you got to keep in mind you can take 20 hoppers. So you can take 20 hoppers and give them the 5-up ward, and you can give them the crit mortals from the Squeak Boss. So they are more effective in terms of stacking buffs, which is a relevant factor. But overall, they're less effective per point than the Boingrots. Spider Riders. So I have included the bows, and for these sorts of ranged mixed units, I have actually included both the range profile and the melee profile. But this is a little bit fake. So they've got a good score here because they're cheap, but being cheap is not that good. You take up a lot of space with cavalry, so there's a lot of chance of getting charged. And so what that means is that if you're a cheap unit that will just all die before you get hit, then yes, okay, you're good in terms of effectiveness per point, but are you really going to be able to use that effectiveness when there's always a chance of your unit getting one shot? That's the problem. Boingrots have the same issue, but the maths on Boingrots is just much better than the Spider Riders. So yes, the Spider Riders are marginally better in terms of durability, but the damage is much worse. Okay, so an interesting unit was the Mournfang pack. It's actually quite good. 18.5, puts them kind of middling level. They're really skewed into damage, is what I would say. So, pretty good damage per point. The durability is quite bad, though. So, I actually think it's probably the worst in terms of durability of any unit that I did on this list. So, you have to keep that in mind. But the damage is quite high. So, overall, decent unit, but yeah, definitely skewed towards damage. The opposite end of things is the Gore Grunters, which are definitely skewed towards durability. So that's their situation. The Boar Boys are the same. They do almost no damage at all, but really durable. They actually might be the most durable unit on this list because it's 15 wounds on a 5-up, 6-up. Which basically is a 4-up save, kind of, you can think about it as that way. So 15 wounds on a 4-up save for 140 is better than most of the units you'll find here. So yeah, that's the interesting part about Boar Boys. Now what's interesting about Bone Splitters in general is that your Savage Oryx are basically the same points and you get 5 more wounds, but is that worth losing all the speed? I don't know. For me, I just think Boar Boys are the way. We have Snarlfang Riders from Gits, who are relatively bad. Not much to say there. Probably shouldn't have included them, but they look cool, so I wanted to see what they did, but pretty bad. Boar Maniacs are just worse than Boar Boys. And that's Destruction. So I think Destruction overall, because of Gits, probably has one of the higher average effectiveness. Maybe Death is better. I don't know. But definitely up there. And we have Order, which is our largest category here. So we have the best one here is Raptidon Chargers, which are the second place overall amongst this list. Very cheap. Good durability because it's 15 wounds on a 5-up save for 140, which is pretty good. Only outdone by Ball Boys, I believe. And yeah, basically you get pretty decent damage on the charge for the points. Pretty good durability, 140. Yes, they're a little bit skewed towards making sure they get the charge, but if they do more damage than they should for their points. Cities of Sigmar, Drakespawn Knights are really solid, and so are the other two cities options here. So what I've done is with the cities ones, I've just given them all a 6-up ward because it's so easy to get a 5-up ward, but it's only in combat. So I'm kind of thinking that half the time you'll have a ward, half the time you won't. For the Frigate Cavaliers, you actually do have access to a 5-up ward from Pontifex, which maybe moves the needle a little bit, but you can see the Drakespawn Knights, the Dark Riders, and the Cavaliers are pretty much the same in terms of the math. I would say amongst this, though, that the Dark Riders are quite a bit better than the other two because of their end-of-turn ability to retreat and do mortal wounds. So they basically do more damage and then also can make sure they can apply their +1 damage on the charge. But the other two are still very strong as well. In terms of the skew, you can kind of see that the tankiest is the Dark Riders, right? Because it's 15 wounds on a 4-up save for 150, I believe the 4-up save. And maybe the 5-up, I don't know. And then the other two are good as well. But actually, I think that makes the Dark Riders the best on this list. They're better than Ball Boys, right? So, yeah. That's actually interesting. Yeah. No, there's one unit that's better. Is that right? No, that looks wrong. Just let me check something down here. I think I've done the Spy Riders wrong. We'll get to them in a second, I think. But 15 wounds for... I forgot the 7 here. That's why. All right. Sorry about that. Let me fix this up so that we hide this. Okay. So where are we? We were at... Yeah. Then we have Agronons as the next thing. So skewed towards damage, I would say. Same sort of durability as Dragon Ogres. Well, exactly the same, actually. But the damage is super nice. So that's the... I've included one extra attack from their mounts, because you can easily get that. But obviously they can scale up the more they're in combat. And they do D3 at the end of every turn as well, basically from their sub-faction. So I think Agronons are probably up there with the best cavalry in the game. They're definitely... Yeah, they've also kind of got Ignore Rend 1 as well. So I think that they're definitely up there for best cavalry in the game. Definitely a good argument for them. Okay, then we have Morsar Guards. So very skewed towards damage on the charge, but to do decent damage and okay durability. Just an okay unit overall. Now the Stormcast was interesting because all of the... basically, all of the Dracothian Guard variants kind of outperformed the other options. So, only by a little bit, but you can see that they outperform Evocats and also the Palladors. So, only by a little bit, but I think basically because of their damage being better, yes, their durability is quite a bit worse than Evocats or Palladors. But, yeah, overall... The damage is higher. Okay, so then we have a bunch of other units here. So Daughters of Cain Warlocks are just like worse versions of Dark Riders in terms of damage and durability, so they're down here. Okay, Dawn Riders, I've actually included the 5-up doing mortals here, so this actually can give you a pretty good indication of this unit being not that great. I haven't included the charge mortals against infantry, but when I say they're not that great, I think it's just like Dawn Riders, it's just very all your eggs in one basket. Like you run 10 and you need to just buff the shit out of them, otherwise they're not worth the points. Is basically what I'm getting from this thing here. So if you're always prepared to give them like -1 to hit and 5-up ward defensively or 5-up mortals on the charge, then they're decent to good. Otherwise, they're actually probably not worth taking. A lot of people have actually arrived at that and have started taking Wardens instead of Dawn Riders in their Lumineth lists, and I expect to see that going forward. They're just very expensive. To give some context here, right, if I change this to, 210, which is what they were before, then that's actually quite a big difference. Then they're sort of moving towards that upper echelon, and you used to be able to stack the 5-up crits and the -1 to hit, and that just makes them a lot better overall. So they're actually quite expensive now for what they do, I think. Okay, then there's a bunch of options down here that are kind of not great. Yeah, you can see. Okay, the Palladors with javelins. Yes, this is a high number here. But you have to think about it in the context of, yes, they do less damage, but it's kind of out of sequence damage. So, yeah. I might actually have to go and reanalyze that. Maybe the math on this is slightly wrong, because I have to include 3 instances of the Lancers, I guess. Okay, I might have to redo the math on javelins, but the rest of it here, I'm kind of not going to go into because it's all pretty average units. The bugs in Sylvaneth just do really bad damage for the points. Ishland Guard, this is kind of a tank unit, so it doesn't do any damage. Ripidactyl Riders are just terrible. I don't think there's any reason to run Ripidactyl Riders in Seraphon. Based on this math, I mean, yeah, they're fast, but like you have so many good options in terms of cavalry that I don't see the point. Yep, and that's kind of where we got to. So we're gonna see which unit is the best by ranking and sorting by point per effectiveness. So let's do this. So sword range. Yes, we have a header. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so you can see in first place here we have Boingrots, and then we go Raptidon Chargers, and then Hoppers, and yes, Spider Riders are 4th place. Again, we talked about it though. It's a little bit fraud, but yeah. Now with the Spider Riders, I have included the Moon bonus for the mortals, obviously, and also the bows. Then we have a bunch of Cities of Sigmar stuff and Agronons, and then rounding out the top 10 is Death Riders and Dragon Ogres. So I think interesting, like stuff that I would look again. Yeah, I would have another look at. I think Dark Riders are probably still underused. Like I get that there's a lot of other good options in Cities of Sigmar, but I just think that this unit, it just has to be good with this points, right? They're so effective in terms of the durability. It's surely gonna be good. Surely. I know, like the problem with the elves is they just don't have that great synergy. Yeah, but I will definitely try putting some more Dark Riders in my Cities of Sigmar lists. The Boingrot Bounders are the big highlight for me. I need to start bringing them more in Gits. They just seem super good for the points. I'm sure if we put Squigherd in here, I think Squigherd probably outdo them in terms of damage per point, I would imagine. But other than that, they're better. In a lot of ways, they can actually get objectives and, you know, probably do more damage on the charge, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to look at that. But, yeah, that's what I'd expect there. The Hoppers, I've been beating my Hopper drum for ages, but actually, you know, 6-up save, don't be misled by that. It's actually one of the best points per wound in the list. In that higher range here. Yep. And then, you know, if we're looking at the fraudometer, we go down a list, like, you know, I think you can say that, you know, stuff like Dawn Riders and Varangard and Chaos Knights, it's probably just, like, not as good as we all are doing. Like, they're probably just a little bit over-deployed for how strong they are. Like, yes, these are tanky units, but you're kind of relying on all-out defense. You got to think about it that way, right? Like, if you have a 6-up save unit that's just tanky on the basis of wounds, you don't need to rely on that all-out defense. It seems like with Slaves to Darkness, you're always going to be pushed towards a pretty Death Star-y playstyle, right? Because you have, you know, your once per army 5-up ward, and you kind of once per army all-out defense. It's kind of how you can think about it, right? So you push in that direction to make the best use out of these units, but on the math, they're not as good as the other units. So that's where I'm at with the math. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you did. I don't think it's going to be like as enjoyable as a view experience, I guess, than my other videos, but I hope you get something out of this in terms of list building. I'll link the spreadsheet below in case I make some updates, because I'm sure I will. In terms of, because I think the math on the Javelin Palladors is wrong. I'll probably update that, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want to see some more math. I hope this helps you list build, start looking at other options, As I always say to my patrons on Onwards who I coach, the best way for you to win a GT is to find something that's undercosted and gone under the radar a little bit and use it. That's just the best way to win a GT, right? Especially if it's something that's a little bit underestimated, like maybe your opponent disrespects you a little bit in the game. This is going to be your best approach. So if you're a Gits player, look at hoppers and bounders. All right, if you're a Seraphon player, a lot of you played Agrodons already, but definitely have a look. Everyone's playing Death Riders, but just want to reinforce that that's a strong unit. And yeah, your cities of Sigmar Cavalry. We know it's strong, but reinforcing again, they're good. All right. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you very much. Bye.